Before Uber, there was Zipcar, the car-sharing service launched in 2000 right here in Boston. I caught up with the company's president, Tracey, Zhen, and discussed operating in the city.
We're based out in an innovation district, which is where the tech hub is. So for us, that vibrant community of companies, but people, it's been a huge success for us. And on top of that, for us at Zipcar, the most important thing is people, it's our talent. So we're really lucky because we have access to great technology companies in Boston, but also access to top universities at our doorstep.
I mean, Boston has got to be kind of a great test lab in general, right? Because you do think a lot about urban planning and or the urban environment.
Sure, absolutely. It's one of those cities that's growing fast, but also like a good size where lots of testing. So what you see is a lot of mobility companies being based in Boston and doing tons of testing, and it's emerging. So it's really exciting.
I got to ask you about, the demographics of Zipcar today, because it kind of floored me when I went back and did some research that it's 20 years that this company has been around, right? I remember when it was introduced. So tell me a little bit about what is your typical Zipcar user today. Tell me a little bit about, your top and bottom line growth. Tell me about user retention. Give me an idea.
Sure. Well, our member base, everyone thinks we're a millennial brand because our brand is so fun and innovative, but we actually have members that range from 18 years old to 93.
Wow.
Right, but 40% of our member base are over 40, so we're actually, a bit skewed older. And we're really serving the people of the city. They're urban, they're smart, they're savvy, and they live and work in the city. That's our core base. And we don't really comment on financials just because we're part of the Avis Group, so I can't say too much, but our member top line growth is growing really rapidly, and I think as more and more people feel comfortable shedding their car and using services like Zipcar, it's been a huge momentum for us.
It's great that you bring that up because we were thinking about this talking in the newsroom that you guys are kind of a great test experiment or a great experiment of that whole idea of the sharing economy. There's been a lot of research about teenagers not so interested in getting, driver's permits or driver's license anymore, and it's not just in the US, but it's a global phenomenon. What are you guys seeing as kind of the experiment of that idea of the sharing economy and people maybe eventually saying, I don't need to own a car?
Well, what's fascinating is the company was founded 19 years ago, as you mentioned. At the time, there was no such thing as a sharing economy. There was no iPhone, right? This is how long ago it was. So at the time when the company was founded, the vision was really bold. It was this view that in the future, that consumers are going to want to pay for the trip and not the car. So that was how the sharing economy was born. And being pioneers in the car sharing space, we've been really fortunate because we've had 19 years to innovate and to experiment on how usage is changing. And I think as more and more services, as you mentioned, Netflix, Spotify, what have you.
Right.
I think the movement towards paying for access and less ownership is really going to continue to evolve.
Well, from what you guys are seeing over these 20 years, Tracey, and as you said, there's more options now that play into the sharing economy. When people say there's going to be a day when we're not going to own a car, do you see that actually happening based on the numbers and the data that you're seeing?
Absolutely. I think especially in cities, today over 70% of urbanites still own a car. And we've been chipping away at that for the last 19 years. And the numbers starting to fade away. I think as more people start to question, well, A, there's so much congestion, do I really want to drive?
Right.
But two, the cost of ownership is just outweighs the hassle and so on and so forth. So I think services like ours is really going to help propel the reduction of personal car ownership over time.
So when somebody becomes a Zipcar member and part of your community, I don't know, what data do you guys see that they either give up their car or give up plans to buy a car? What do you know about that?
We see tons of people who are considering buying a car, and after they join, not only do they not obviously buy a car, but they also use a lot more other forms of public transportation, cycling and walking. So overall, they become much more green in how they behave and how they live in a city, so which has been huge for us.
So you do see them giving up and saying, I'm not going to own a car.
Absolutely. We have so many members that tell us, would have bought a car, but I don't need to anymore because I use your service every single day. We actually have a commuter program that we just piloted that is really giving access for reverse commuters Monday through Friday. And they're like, well, I had to purchase a car to get to work, but now I don't need to.
What about retention? Because I always think about any of these services. You mentioned Netflix, like all of these services, some of them spend a lot on marketing, right, and reaching out to consumers and then holding on to their existing user base. Give me an idea about that. Has that become a bigger part of your financial pie? You've got to spend more time and money on that effort?
Well, I think for any subscription business, retention has got to be a #1 metric for the business. I think for us, what we really focus on is great member experience. And I think it comes down to, A, am I getting a great service, but two, is it a good value? So when we think about retention, we just anchor on how do we continuously improve our member experience. experience. And as we do more and more of that, retention will naturally come.
Okay, I want to ask you about Uber and Lyft. Is that your chief competition? Who do you see as the competition?
So our competition has always been, as I mentioned, car ownership, right? If you think about that pie, it's huge, right? 70% of urbanites still own a car, and if we can chip away at that, that's a huge opportunity for us.